Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar from Courant. So we are talking about AI in commercial operations, as you have guessed, but I am human, I am not an avatar. I'm Brian, and a partner here at Courant, and ready to talk you through 8 different use cases in just 30 minutes. So let's not pause, let's get at it. I'll do a brief kind of reflection on where we are after now having 4 years of ChatGPT and access to these tools, and then we'll dive right into 8 different ones. And then at the end of the session today, we're going to talk more about how to actually get it done, right? Because I think a lot of us are doing pilots and fewer of us are actually in production with good stuff. So that's what we're going to do. So again, my name is Brian. I've been in Courant for 5 years and worked basically my entire life in this space. So let's not spend more time on that. Let's just get going. So of course, there's really 2 big promises for enterprises in the commercial operation space when we talk about AI. There's definitely the obvious one in productivity, doing more with less. Hey, can we cover the same accounts with fewer people? Can the same people cover more accounts? Can marketing go from launching 4 campaigns to 10 campaigns? Can we do everything quicker, faster, better? That's definitely one use case. And then there's the second use case, which we are going to cover a few of today, that are more innovation oriented. Can we do things we never thought possible? Hey, could we service customers we don't service at all today in a new way with a combination of very few people and great AI tools? That's definitely a possibility. So sounds very promising, right? But let's also be honest that it's been 4 years since ChatGPT launched, and when we talk to commercial leaders and say, okay, so what's the impact out here? What's actually happening? I can say with certainty that the biggest impact by far is FOMO. We are all thinking that everyone else has done amazing things with half the people and are deeply experts in Claude or whatever, using the latest models and totally cutting edge. Let me reassure you to begin with that we're all in this boat. We're all suffering from a bit of FOMO. And I think it's also part of the reason for why we want to do this webinar. Give people an honest kind of look into what other people are doing and see, of course, what can we learn from it. But definitely FOMO so far, very big impact. And the reason for that is, of course, that even though AI and the surface looks sexy, easy, simple, I just put in a prompt and then I get something back. To really get something into a enterprise level production, you face a lot of challenges. You face the same IT challenges that you faced with almost everything else, the data quality. But of course, you also face new challenges like the AI technology changing basically every 3rd month. And then we have a new phenomenon. Because it's so easy to get started, we also have a lot of companies doing proof of concepts and pilots and stuff like that that seem exciting but never really make it into production. So there's a couple of considerations before we jump into the cases. My main one is that, hey, we know the potential is there because we know when we look at what do salespeople, for example, do today, we know they are actually not very productive in terms of speaking to customers. We know they only spend less than a third of their time selling, and we know that this trend is going down. So of course, there is potential here for AI to help reverse this trend. That's the number one takeaway. But the second takeaway is that if we want to do that, we have to get out of the prompting space. Of course, that's where all AI starts. That's where ChatGPT started. One individual prompting and getting something back. And we know that that's great for things like summarizing calls and meetings and spell checking and all this good stuff, helping to do a little bit of prospecting and so on. But we truly believe that to break out of this, let's call it pilot theater, where everyone does something on their own, we have to zoom in on fewer, very core commercial processes that live in the functions so that are sales, marketing, customer service specific, and really drill on getting them all the way to production. Could be things like prospecting, could be things like cross-selling, account management, important processes that are hard to do where AI can make a difference. And of course, also consider the longer term business innovation where the whole engagement model is in play, right? If we think about a lot of enterprise companies, they have a few very big accounts, they have a medium layer of important accounts that humans cover, and then they have thousands and thousands of accounts that might not even get any attention. Okay, that's an actual business innovation opportunity. What if we served them way better? All right, so core learning here, lots of potential, still a lot of FOMO and pilot theater. And if we really want to get to a valuable space, we have to make this jump from prompts to processes. So what does that actually look like? What processes could we open up, and what does the solution look like? I'll cover 8 today. There's much more out there, but in a lightning round, hopefully you get a chance to see what other people are doing and what's working. All right. So we're going to start in a very traditional industry. We're going to start in banking, actually. Of course, a heavily regulated space where there's kind of limits to what you can do, but also where there's a lot of opportunity because of the data. So here's an example of cross-selling and account management that's living in a business banking context. So what you have to imagine is if you're an advisor, salesperson at a bank, you might own 100, 200, 300 customers' accounts that you have to continuously account manage, advise, help with daily tasks as well, and of course, cross-sell. They typically come into the bank buying one thing, working with one area, and then of course it's your job as an advisor to cross-sell them to other parts of the bank. And we know that's hard. We know that's hard in banking, and we know it's hard in all other industries. And of course, in the past, we've done lots of training and help and playbooks and tools to help with that. But I think what we've found recently is that here AI can play a really big part because we have access to data and because we can structure how we want this to be done ideally and then roll it out for all advisors. So the case here is from a Nordic bank that basically has an engine that continuously looks at their account portfolios and scans for cross-sales and account management signals. So one example could be if you're a small business and things are going really well and you build up liquidity. You have savings on your accounts and maybe one day you have a few million Danish kroner on the account. That's a trigger for the advisor to go and speak to the customer. In the ideal world, every advisor would do this on their own. They would sit and scan through their own portfolios and do this work on their own. But of course, if you manage 200 accounts, it's basically impossible. So instead, there's a combination of rule-based data and AI to scan for these opportunities continuously. But of course, we want to take it a step further. We want to also turn that signal into action. And so, for example, if we continue with our case with a successful company having some savings, it would actually write an email and it would also send it to that email, to that customer from the advisor's own email, just in a plain human voice. Hi, noticed that you have extra liquidity lying around. We actually have both a great savings and a great investment product. Would you be open to talking 10, 15 minutes on the phone? And of course, why stop there? If the customer actually responds, now you need a meeting booked in. But of course, the agent can have access to the advisor's account and Outlook. So of course, shoot back a few potential times to meet so we can get a meeting set up and actually do the selling. So what have we done here? We've cut several tasks out of the advisor's own time. They don't need to do research. They don't need to do outreach. They don't need to do calendar planning. They just need to be in more meetings with the customer. So that means you cross-sell a lot more. And of course, it also means in this case that they were able to cover more accounts with fewer people without losing revenue on them. You could say it looks something like this if we take the agent perspective, right? That we have a very senior advisor who has 4 agents working for him. 1, the advisor agent over on the left side here, scanning the portfolio. 2, an outreach agent that keeps in touch with his customers. 3, a calendar agent that tries to book these meetings and get them in on his calendar, and 4, one that helps him with administration. The funny thing is that when talking to the bank in question here, the advisor said, this kind of looks like how it was 30 years ago, that I had a bunch of assistants, junior people helping me do my tasks, but these days they don't exist, but instead that work is done by agents. Okay, so that was one example. Let's take another one, also from a financial sector. So here we are talking about a fuel and retail company, Circle K, that uses AI to increase their seller efficiency. The way they're doing that is that they get a lot of leads in every single month from marketing and from the stations and from local events and from all kinds of different sources. And of course, if you're a salesperson, you might handle hundreds, if not thousands of leads every single month. So how do you do that efficiently, effectively, but also with a pitch that works for that particular customer? So the way they do that in Circle K is that everything flows through a simple outreach assistant, where the stuff that we know about the lead, where is it from, where do they live, where's their headquarters, etc., is matched with very strong location data. So for example, if this particular lead is from a company in Florida, we know exactly how many stations do we have versus competitors in the local area. We know also what we would typically have as a strong value proposition depending on the existing provider you have. So let's say they are together with Chevron today. We know we have better fraud protection with them. So we help the seller in the call do that qualification and also formulate the value proposition for them. So the seller can take more leads because they need to do less research, and they also have better conversations because they're coming with a data-backed value proposition. As an example on lead management, let's stay a bit in the financial sector with one last case from this place, which is customer acquisition and outreach. So here we are working with a very large fintech that primarily sells to small local businesses. That of course means they have hundreds and thousands of customers, or potential customers, if not millions. And the challenge here when you're doing this type of work is often that doing this kind of manual outreach and lead generation is super difficult, and it often has very low hit rates because you're just kind of spamming people, for lack of a better word. So what an AI enables us to do here is actually to instead look for a signal, a reason for contacting someone, and then use data and again AI to formulate a specific value proposition for that lead. So the example here is, again, the company selling to mostly local businesses. So in this particular view, we could have a signal that's based on cases. So if we have, let's say, 5 other customers within your area now booked, that's probably a very strong reference story and a very strong signal for this particular customer. So we have that data in, and we match it with a prospects table where we have all the different people we might want to sell to, filter out the people we already sell to, and then do the contact with a best fit outreach channel. So again, if it's a local business, sometimes email is right, sometimes it might be Instagram, for example, that's the right channel. And then a AI generated sequence that's tweaked with the outreach messaging based on the signal. So of course, in this case, it might be, hi, we already have these other 5 companies that we're working with close to you. This one that you might be familiar with actually saved $5,000, whatever, every year on switching to our solution. Would you be interested in a quick 5-minute call to hear what we have to say and get a price? That's a super strong outreach message that in every sense of the word feels human and intelligent because it's based on great data and smart AI. Let's leave the financial sector and look at something completely different. It's the construction sector. So here's an example of a building materials company that primarily sells by influencing architects. So architects have a very important role in the construction sector because they influence and specify purchases. So The challenge if you're a account manager here is that you, again, might have 100, 200 different architects that you're trying to reach and influence all the time. And it's quite hard to figure out, like, why? Why should you reach out to them at any given point? What's really the reason for it? So what ends up is typically nothing. Nothing gets done. The account manager actually does not do it. So what we've instead built here is an example of using what we call project databases in the building industry. So in the building industry, there are these large project databases that basically hold all larger construction projects in a certain market. So if a university is planning a big renovation, everyone knows it because it's in the project database, and we know it will be a tender eventually. So what we're doing here is that we're using that project database data to match to potential architects and then generating messaging and actions for the seller. So let's stay with our example. There's a big university in the middle of Copenhagen that's about to enter a tender and is going to renovate a part of the university. Now there might be 5 large architects that we think are probably relevant and could be bidding on this project. So instead of waiting until the tender, we reach out to them proactively and said, hey, I'm sure you've seen this new tender by Copenhagen University or whatever. We looked at it and we actually think these and these products could be super relevant because they have so and so sustainability requirements, whatever the relevant messaging might be. Would you be interested in taking a quick follow-up and discussing it? So now we're doing 2 things. 1, we are reaching out with a super relevant message. And 2, we're also just keeping our brand, our company, top of mind, relevant, continuously influencing the architects. They might not even bid on this project, but they have an exceptional experience here because their account manager is proactive, reaches out to them, comes with an idea and a suggestion. So an huge increase in the quality of account management, whether they win the deal or not. That was an account management case. Of course, it's also relevant to look at earlier in the funnel and look at prospecting. So here's an example from another building materials company that's operating a lot of markets and then also some markets where they have a very small footprint. So in this case, it is a single seller working the market of Poland. And of course, when you are a construction company, you also want to talk to installers. So installers being plumbers, HVAC installers of different kinds that actually buy and install your products. So in Poland, for example, we actually found 580,000 relevant installers, small companies primarily, that this seller could talk to. And of course, that's an extraordinary task for one person to ever get started on filtering and prospecting to all of these people. So we went through a process here of first starting with the 580,000, doing a rough filter of, just size and relevance and so on down to 15,000, and then using AI to really get down to the very best prospects and to formulate a clear value proposition from us to them. So one of the key features here was using AI to just look at their website. So is this a good fit account? Well, most companies actually describe that themselves very well on the website. So for example, in this case, it's a building materials company that works a lot with bathrooms, for example. So it's very easy to figure out, me as a person, if I open a website of a plumber, if that's a plumber that works with private bathrooms, for example, renovation of those. The thing is here, we can do it at scale. So we had that AI agent look at over 15,000 individual companies to try to qualify down who is really best fit for us. And this was a major pipeline driver for this single individual seller that's now being rolled out to additional markets. Let's switch gears into the hospital sector. So hospitals and medtech, so medical equipment, is often bought via tenders. And tender management and tender response, I think, is maybe one of the most proven AI use cases in commercial operations today. Typically because there's a lot of tenders, so there is a kind of sourcing use case of trying to find those tenders. There is a qualification use case of trying to see, are these actually relevant for us? And then, which this is an example of, there is a response use case of pulling in all the data we have around our products, from marketing assets, our website, product sheets, previous tenders, and so on, and building a very structured data set around a particular product set, and then using that very specific data to respond to the tender. And the whole, you could say, magic sauce here is really getting the data right, because you can just upload any tender into Claude or ChatGPT and you'll get an okay response, but you'll know for sure that this is generated by AI and might have some mistakes in it. We can't have that in tenders. And that's why the whole job here is actually to build up a very specific data foundation and only use that data to answer the tender and not the World Wide Web, so to say. So for this particular company, a very successful pilot rollout showing over 30% time reduction in completing tenders, which for a company like this that produces thousands of tenders every year is a massive impact. Let's switch gears again to the logistics industry. I'll cover this very briefly because a colleague of mine, Martijn, covered this a couple of months ago on a webinar dedicated to this. But if you were not there, I'll recap it briefly because we think it's quite powerful. So value propositions are important. Why choose X product over Y product? Both in relation to competitors, but also in relation to the rest of your portfolio. So a value proposition can often really make or break a new product. Like, can people really understand what I'm buying here? And that's an interesting project if you have one or two products, But what if you have 50 or 100 products and you keep launching 10 new every year that influence the old products? Then you might actually get a lot of value out of using AI to generate, validate, draft, and activate these value propositions. And again, that requires a lot of inputs. It requires you, let's say, formulating what is a good value proposition to you, using inputs from both the category, the customers, the competitors, and the company, and then establishing a clear framework for how we want the output to be. So in the case we're showing here, that there's something that's relating first to the customer, who are we talking to, who's buying this, what categorizes they're buying, and then the actual value proposition of what category does it belong to, what's the capabilities of the product, what features prove that it's great, and what outcomes can you as a customer expect from it. And then embed AI in the workflow to both brief on the value proposition, draft the initial response, get it out to a human to do reviews and validation, and then again use AI to help activate and deploy it. Now you've done a great value proposition, but does it get onto the website? Does it get embedded into the sales material? Does it get moved all the way into maybe a distributor channel, etc.? Again, a use case for AI where we've seen, in this case, in the logistics industry, very, very strong time saving. That's the first thing we look for, the productivity angle, but actually also a remarkable jump in quality sometimes, especially in the products that might not have gotten a lot of attention before. Last case for today is a strategic account orchestration case. So for most enterprise companies, they have a concept of strategic accounts, key accounts, A accounts, whatever you call them, that really require a lot of sales and marketing orchestration. The problem is you might have 100 accounts covered by 50 different salespeople and I don't know how many marketeers. And developing plans based on real account insights and actually outputting maybe some account-specific content is a real challenge at scale. So what this example covers, again in the logistics industry, is that we pull data from CRM and we pull data from marketing sources to generate an orchestration dashboard. First of all, where we can see where are different accounts against target and so on, but also to generate more actionable plans. So let's say in this fictive case here with the Lego Group, we have Lego Group as a target account. where are we today? Where are we trying to get to? What's the activity plan that's going to get there? And by kind of systemizing it, you ensure that everyone gets a plan, that you can also do account-specific content for all of these accounts, and that you have one way of following up on them. And in the dream world, this would kind of already exist in Salesforce, of course, or Dynamics, or whatever CRM you have. But the reality is that, and the messy reality is that it just isn't in many companies. So building this extra layer of software can really make sense. And in many ways, I think that leads me to my final use case, which for me might be the most impactful long-term use case for commercial operations, and that is software development. So Mark Andreessen, an early internet pioneer behind Netscape, among other things, once said that software will lead the world. And of course it did. There's software everywhere. We are interacting through software right now. Software is in our shopping and our sales and everything we do every day. But in many ways it's been limited to quite few people, right? Software has been done by the IT department, software developers, and they've kind of had a monopoly on doing that. And of course, one of the big innovations that AI brings is that, one, it makes software development faster. Clearly, that's one of the most proven use cases. And two, it also enables more people to eat at the dinner table, so on, as software is going to eat the world. So what we really think is that the commercial operation is going to increasingly in the future play a part in developing their own software, whether that's tools that sit on top of the CRM, for example, or adjacent to it, or are very specific to a use case like learning or analysis. We think that this is going to be a real game changer for a lot of commercial teams, and we already see some of the big, some of the most innovative companies doing this. Whether it's, I share an example of our own internal learning system that we coded without any software developers, or a bunch of analysis tools that we already use to do this kind of stuff cheap and quick, and in place of very expensive external software development. Okay, so lots of use cases, lots of places to win, and maybe one slightly longer term input from me on the software development side. In the final 5 minutes, I'm just going to give a few thoughts on how to actually win in this space, because again, there are also, to be fair, a lot of us that are getting stuck in proof of concepts and pilots and so on. It's still early days, right? So we don't have, I don't think anyone has really the 100% answer to do this right. I would say I would like to share 3 observations today. Number one is to keep it close. And what I mean by that is that I don't think you can win with AI adoption by centralizing it, by saying that's something this chief AI architect over in the corner will do, or that's something I will put in IT, or what's the company AI strategy. I also don't think you can leave it up to individuals, right? You really have to own it in the function. So if you're a sales leader, if you're a marketing leader, I don't think you can wait necessarily. I think you really have to take ownership of your own future in AI here, because when you look at an enterprise level, AI can go many places: customer service, operations, everything. And I don't think IT is going to come up with the answer for what should AI solve for in sales. I think it should be the function that owns this, particularly because it's possible now with AI. This is not like ERP. The second thing is really what we 100% know doesn't work is giving every employee Copilot training and then hoping for the best. We know for sure that that doesn't work. That will give minor productivity increases at best, and at worst, it will just make people confused. So again, it's up to the function to say what are the core processes, commercial processes. We covered a lot today: account management, prospecting, strategic account orchestration, that really make the difference for me. And maybe to that point, really trying to make fewer real bets. And we've been part of this ourselves. I mean, it is really fun to do pilots with AI, and too many companies end up doing way too many pilots that never really have the right data foundation, never really get embedded into a real change exercise in the organization. So that's my third advice, is to really do fewer real bets. Yes, it's fun and quick to work with AI, but the whole work of getting it embedded in the organization, getting the data right, is still there. So just throwing 100 pilots at the wall and seeing what sticks simply isn't the answer. And my last thought around this is that what we're seeing is a little bit funny thing going on right now that could be called the AI productivity paradox, which is that as we roll out AI, we don't necessarily get the AI productivity benefits we're looking for, because we're moving from zero AI adoption, just working the way we're working, to where a lot of companies are now, a little bit of AI fatigue, because we're rolling out things, we're piloting, we're training new tools, new concepts. You should do agents, you should do this, you should that. Have you done your MD file? All of these different things that require new ways of working. And it's cognitive load on every employee. And that's what we see right now, is that if you overdo this, you actually get a negative productivity benefit. Of course, if you get few key processes into production, we can see it generates value, but we also see this, that you get stuck in POC, proof of concept hell, and just keep churning out pilots that never really add up. So that's my final advice to you, is I would say, again, fewer real bets, core commercial processes. So if I would leave you with a thought starter, it is really picking one commercial AI process that has more promise than anything else and really giving it a go. It has to be commercially valuable, sorry. It has to be something that we don't do well enough today. Either we don't do it at all, let's say prospecting, or we do it poorly. Could be account management, and that you have relevant data to work with. You saw some examples today of using project databases, external company databases, banking data, all of this stuff that makes it actually usable. So that's my parting thought today. I hope you enjoyed this lightning quick round through 8 different use cases and a few slides to start and end with as well. I mean, we wouldn't be consultants if we didn't have that, right? So thank you for today and have a wonderful